Want to save time, money, and your sanity while planning your wedding? Subscribe to Wedding Planning Podcast Premium on Apple Podcasts for early ad-free access to all weekly episodes, plus an exclusive bonus series that outlines exactly how to use ChatGPT to your advantage with dedicated meetings for customizing your budget, finding the perfect venue, hiring your vendors, and so much more. Save hours of time, avoid tons of wedding overwhelm, and make confident decisions faster. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts and start planning with clarity. Enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome to today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. A huge congratulations on your engagement, and I do hope you're enjoying the Wedding Planning Podcast. I also hope you'll share the show with someone who's helping you plan or in any of the wedding forums that you like to hang out in. I would love to reach as many engaged couples as possible, and I can do that with your help. So thank you in advance for sharing the show. I also want to say that I love hearing from you with your wedding questions, and I have an open door at all times. Last week on the podcast, we did an in-depth workshop on setting a wedding budget that makes sense for you. And today's conversation about choosing a venue that works for you is going to build on that conversation from last week. So if you missed it, please go back and have a listen. Today, I want to help you find the perfect wedding venue for your celebration. And since your venue is a really big deal, we have a lot to cover. So here's an outline of where we're going in today's show. We're going to talk about exactly how to go about finding the best venue for you and your celebration. We're going to review a bunch of really important questions that you should be asking potential venues. For example, I have a whole special set of questions to ask an all-inclusive venue, to ask a blank slate venue. And then finally, we're going to also review the best ways that you can go about finding a venue near you. So some research tips, etc. And of course, as always, I will have a written recap of everything we discussed today, including an at-a-glance outline, and you can find that on our website. I will link it in the show notes when you have a hands-free moment. To get started today and to kind of build a foundation for our conversation, I want to take some time to talk about why your wedding venue is so important. So first and foremost, this is likely the wedding budget category where you will invest the most money. So it is very important that you make a really careful decision when you're deciding on your venue. Your venue is going to impact nearly every single other wedding decision that you'll make. And I want to pause here for just a moment with a very important disclaimer. Your wedding venue is not something that you should rush into. Pretty please, if you take nothing else away from today's conversation, I'll say that one more time. Your venue is not a decision to rush into. Booking a venue is automatically going to trigger a series of other commitments, and it's also going to close a lot of doors as you go forward. So please have a solid overall wedding vision in mind before committing to a venue. This is a very, very important decision. I don't say that to be overly dramatic. I don't say that to scare you. I don't say it to intimidate you, but it really is important to acknowledge how many other decisions do fall contingent on the venue you choose. So it's going to make a huge impact in the way your wedding path goes forward from that decision moving ahead. To pause and recap that really quickly, your venue is a big deal. And now we're going to dive in and go into some more specifics. Starting with, your wedding venue is going to set the tone and the atmosphere of your overall celebration. So this venue, the space, is really going to dictate the style and the overall vibe of your wedding, whether that's rustic or elegant, modern, traditional, casual. This is going to be the first impression that all of your guests have of your celebration, and it's really going to frame the ambiance and the vibe that you want your guests to enjoy. The venue also impacts your guests' comfort and overall experience, from parking and accommodations all the way down to the more granular items like seating arrangements, amenities, restrooms, the layout. A well-chosen venue is going to ensure that everyone feels welcome and comfortable and can sit back and relax and just really enjoy the experience. This one is kind of obvious, but your venue also has a big impact on decor and design and the overall visual impact of your wedding celebration. This is really the backdrop for everything. So if you're looking for a scenic outdoor venue, that's going to require minimal extra decorating work. If a venue is naturally beautiful, you're really doing yourself a favor in that department. On the other hand, an indoor venue that's more of an empty blank space, that's going to need much more thought, planning, and money to ultimately reflect your style. So if you want to do your budget a big favor, I would highly recommend choosing a venue that's naturally beautiful the way it is. Even if it costs a little more, it will probably save you thousands of dollars and hours of time spent on trying to spin your wheels and decorate an empty blank box of a room. We touched on this briefly in the opening to today's show, but your venue is going to account for a significant portion of your wedding budget. Your venue also dictates a ton of other expenses such as catering, rentals, transportation. So choosing wisely can help you allocate your resources much more effectively. And here's a little sneak peek. I'm going to share a listener question this Friday on a Q&A about choosing an all-inclusive venue over a blank space venue. And we're going to highlight some of the common mistakes and budgeting pitfalls that couples make when comparing their options. So that's going to be a really fun show that combines last week's episode about budget with this week's episode about venue. And we're going to put everything together in a really tangible, really detailed real life example. And then, of course, your venue has a big effect on the overall logistics and the planning that you're going to have to put in over the next few months. It's going to determine your timeline, vendor accessibility, the overall event flow of your wedding celebration. So, for example, a venue with an all-inclusive package is really going to simplify your planning, whereas a non-inclusive property is going to require much more research, money, and coordination from you, especially when multiple vendors are involved. If you have the budget and you intend to hire a more full-service wedding planner, then that person can carry a lot of that load for you and do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. But if you're someone who's tight on time and tight on budget, and you don't have a ton of extra time to be planning and micromanaging and researching and coordinating all this stuff on your own, then that's a really important thing to consider as you're shopping for potential venues. And then in terms of your venue and how that affects your logistics and your planning, another important point here is your guests' overall experience. So, of course, it's you over the next few months who's doing all the planning and the organizing and the coordinating. But at the end of the day, you want everyone to have a great experience during the celebration itself. That's literally the whole point of what we're doing here. So keep your guests' experience in mind as you're shopping for venues. And this means considering where people will stay, any transportation logistics, moving people between a ceremony site and a reception site, if those are in two different places, traffic, parking, all of those types of things are important to keep in mind. And another important venue attribute is that it will accommodate very practical needs. So these are the things we can overlook as we're getting in the weeds of decor and wedding vision and all of that other stuff. At the end of the day, a good venue option is going to provide all of the necessary kind of boring facilities and things, such as restrooms, kitchen space, if that's needed for you, dressing rooms, parking spaces, accessibility for guests with disabilities, and more. We want to have a beautiful venue with great catering and an on-site coordinator. That's all very important, but don't overlook these very basic practical needs as well. And then moving into our next point here on your venue needs to align with your personal wedding vision. And we touched on this at the beginning of the show. You should have a very detailed vision for your wedding day prior to committing to any venue. The perfect venue is going to ensure that your unique wedding vision, whether it's a beachfront ceremony, a ballroom, or just a cozy, casual backyard celebration, that all comes to life through your venue. So remember, your venue, it's a reflection of your unique story, your personality as a couple, your wedding vision that you want to share with your guests. So choosing a location that feels authentic to both you and your partner is a really key part of having a smooth and a really, really meaningful wedding celebration. So I'll pause here. Those are all the reasons why your venue is so important. And some of the things to keep top of mind as we get into our next section, which is some more specifics on exactly how to go about finding the best venue for your wedding situation and your celebration. So a lot of this is going to be recap, but we're kind of reframing it in, okay, now I get it. Now I have a wedding vision. How do I go out and find the best venue for us? So to start, number one, define your wedding vision. For today's discussion, focus on these points. First off, the theme and the style. So this is just the vibe that you want for your wedding. Do you want it to feel romantic, rustic, elegant, modern? And you don't even need to define it, but you can write down in your own words some of the descriptors and some of the phrases that kind of encapsulate the vibe that you want to share with your guests. And then as you're looking at venues and researching venues, the space you choose, it should align and complement with whatever that vision is. Very simple, very obvious. Do you want it indoors or outdoors? If you want an indoor venue like a ballroom or an outdoor space like a garden or a beach, those are two very different situations. So it's stuff like that where we can start to say A or B and narrow down your vision, and that'll narrow down your venue options, of course. Also consider the seasons, how your wedding date will impact and influence the venue that you select. So those things go hand in hand. Are you thinking of hosting a wedding weekend? This is another point to consider. If you are dreaming of sharing multiple events over the course of a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday, then that adds another layer to your decision making as you're looking at venues. A space that can be repurposed in multiple ways is a big asset if you want to do a multi-day celebration. So for example, can you find a location that's available for your rehearsal, your ceremony, your reception, and a post-wedding day brunch? I'm going to drop another teaser here because this is a really big topic. I don't want to get too sidetracked today, but I absolutely love multi-day wedding weekend celebrations. And I have a really fun series dedicated to this topic that I will be sharing in the next couple of months. So stay tuned for much more to come on that if you're looking to stretch out your celebration over 3-4 days instead of just one. Love that, and we'll talk a lot more about it. And then step number 2 in finding your ideal venue, you have to set your budget. We touched on this earlier briefly. To go into some more detail, you need to determine how much of your wedding budget will go to your venue. Make adjustments depending on if an option is all-inclusive or if you'll need to source all of the various vendors and services on your own. So to put that another way, if your venue is a blank space with nothing included, then you have to factor in additional costs such as decorations, catering, rentals for tables, chairs, any lighting, a dance floor. Much more to come on that on Friday in that all-inclusive versus DIY venue space Q&A show that I teased earlier. And then also in terms of budget, any hidden fees. So be sure to ask about service charges, taxes, cleaning, overtime fees, built-in gratuities. And this way you can avoid any surprises. If a wedding venue rental fee is $3,000, that's great, but you need to understand if that's including all of the extras, or if it's $3,000 plus a 20% service fee, plus taxes, plus a $300 cleaning fee, and plus $100 per hour that you go over. Those are two very, very different numbers, and I just want to avoid any and all surprises. As you start your search, you'll also need to have a pretty solid estimate of your guest count. And this does not need to be exact, but it needs to be somewhat precise so that you can choose a venue that's going to comfortably accommodate everyone on your list. You need to have enough space for dining, dancing, mingling, and people to move around freely. However, on the flip side of that point, you also don't want too much space. If you have not enough people in a giant room, then it just feels empty and kind of awkward, like something is missing. So we want to find the perfect balance of cozy and festive, but not crowded. So start to sketch out your guest list and start to have an idea of how many people are on that so that you can share that with potential venues and be sure that you're getting put in the appropriate size space. When you're newly engaged and wondering where to even start, one of the easiest first steps is your wedding website. With Minted, you can build a free wedding website designed by independent artists, so it looks elevated without the custom design price tag. Everything lives in one place: your story, wedding details, RSVPs, and registry links. It's simple, clean, and stress-free. Head to weddingplanningpodcast.co/minted to get started today and unlock exclusive listener perks on save the dates, invitations, and more. And of course, you also want to consider location as you're looking at venues. So first of all, we're going to have accessibility. Ensure that your venue is easy for guests to get to, especially if many of them are traveling from out of town. So you're going to think about the location relative to your ceremony site, if you're going to be in two separate places for the ceremony and the reception. And then you're also going to think about, as we talk about accessibility and location and time of year matter. These things go hand in hand. So for example, vacation destinations will be absolutely slammed with inflated prices at certain times of the year, whether it's a beach town in the summer, a lakeside retreat in the fall when the colors are changing, or a skiing destination during the winter time. Location and time of year matter a lot. And then one more wrap-up point on the location is to think about the nearby amenities that are available. So for example, accommodations for out-of-town guests. Is parking readily available? How about dining, transportation options for out-of-town guests? How easy is it to get from the airport? Step inside your guest's shoes and just think about the journey of someone who has to travel from across the country and land at the airport. And then how seamless is that journey for them as they're going to your location? And I'll say here quickly, it does not mean that it's a no-go just because it might be a little more difficult to get from point A to B. If it's your dream venue in your dream location and certain out-of-town guests will be mildly inconvenienced by, a matter of a few miles here and there, I'm not saying that should alter your entire vision and you should just slam the brakes and go another direction. Not at all. It's just one of the many dozens of pieces and moving parts to consider as you're gathering all of this information and making a final decision. And our next point, you will want to visit multiple venues. There is a rare occasion when a couple visits one and they know it's the one and that's it. They don't want to look anymore. If that's you, congratulations. This has all just made your life very, very easy. But for most couples, you'll want to make more than one in-person on-site venue visit to make sure that you're making the best decision for you. So go ahead and schedule a couple tours and really get a feel for the space. You could even show up, depending on what type of venue this is. If it's like a vineyard or a winery or a brewery, you can just show up unannounced and kind of get, collect your feelings and your notes and some photos and move through the space on your own. It doesn't even need to be like an officially scheduled tour necessarily. But as you visit spaces, you do want to pay attention to the layout, the ambiance, the vibe, the lighting. You'll probably have a pretty immediate reaction to the space, whether positive or negative. So tune in and make sure you listen to your instincts. And then while you're there, very important, take a ton of photos, take some video walkthroughs, and make a bunch of notes that you can review and refer back to later. I know in the moment you always think you're going to remember everything, but as we're doing this multiple times, 5, 6 different venues, all that information gets overwritten pretty quickly. Please trust me on that. As you visit spaces and do your research, take a look at the overall venue's services that are available. So for example, here, are they providing you tables, chairs, linens, audio equipment, visual equipment, slide projector, lighting, a dance floor? These are all really important because if you are responsible for them, it's going to add a lot of money to your bottom line price tag. And then another category that's important to think about is your catering and the bar. So see if that venue offers in-house catering or if they allow you to source outside vendors for food and drinks. And even better, do they allow you to bring your own things in, such as liquor, beer, wine, bar supplies? Needless to say, if you have that flexibility and that is an option at a venue space, that can be a really big and really meaningful cost savings to you if you're trying to, watch the budget and keep things as affordable as possible. And then also in a venue's services, do they offer any coordination support? Some venues will have a coordinator available to help you with logistics on the wedding day and maybe even in the days leading up. So this is going to save you the extra expense of having to hire a separate day of coordinator or just the headache of having to manage and delegate that on your own. So you're finding great options, you're taking tours. You also need to check with the availability calendar. So have a handful of your preferred wedding dates, or maybe just one date that's totally non-negotiable to you. That's fine too. But of course, you're going to need to see if that's available at any given venue. And then if your dates are flexible, you're going to be open to finding lots more options and maybe even some discounts. If you're flexible to going off season, to going weekday, to going Sunday, that's very, very specific from couple to couple, but it's going to open up your options a lot. You do want to think about the weather and the seasons. This kind of goes hand in hand with selecting some wedding dates. And then make sure that the venues you're looking at have contingencies for bad weather. For example, if you're planning an outdoor event, what's the backup plan there? And then also in regards to season and weather, consider how that's going to influence the visual aesthetic of any given space. So the flowers, the foliage, the lighting. If the trees are beautiful and full and bursting with blossoms and green leaves, that's going to look very, very different than winter trees that have no leaves and are just bare standing sticks. So think about all of that as you're walking through and looking at the overall vision and the vibe of the places. And I've kind of saved the best for last here because one of your biggest assets in finding a great wedding venue is going to be to pay attention to online reviews from other couples and seek recommendations from your friends and family, or maybe even a wedding that you've been to that you absolutely loved the entire experience. And you can kind of make your life easy and you know the service, you've been there in person, you've experienced an event there. That's something to keep in mind as well. Back to the reviews, people are very honest when they share their online reviews. You can get a wealth of information by heading to Google reviews or Yelp reviews, and people, again, are brutally honest, whether it's good or bad. You should be able to find a bunch of pictures that people have shared, and you can really dig in to the specifics of other people's experiences, and you can get a really good feel for how a place is perceived and how people have enjoyed that place in the past. And that can be really, really valuable, especially if you're on the fence between one or the other. Just reading a handful of online reviews can totally tip the scales immediately. And then to come full circle here and kind of wrap it up, trust your instincts. I know I've mentioned that probably more than once over the course of today's episode, but it's so important. You are going to have an instinct feeling about any given space, and it's important to take note of that. There might be other factors that come in and kind of influence it one way or the other, but the way you feel about a venue is really important. I've been doing this a really long time, and I've heard from so many couples who chose a space because on paper or their friends and family felt like it was the no-brainer decision to make, when in reality they knew in their gut something was not sitting right, but they went ahead and pulled the trigger anyway and had a lot of regrets down the line of the wedding planning process. And I don't want that for you. And the easiest way to make sure that doesn't happen is really to take this whole theme to heart that we started today's show with. This is a really big decision. And that doesn't mean it needs to be scary or intimidating. It just means that you owe it to yourselves to take the time to do the research and to make a really careful decision that you know is going to be the best for the two of you. I do have a quite lengthy list of questions to ask potential venues. Because it is over 35 items long, and because this is an audio show, I don't think it's valuable for me to go through and rattle off 40 different questions. I don't think that's helpful, especially if you're driving or you're working out and you're not in a place where you can take notes on it. So what I'm going to do is I am going to post that list of questions to ask potential venues on our website. I'm also going to put the entire outline of our conversation today for you to refer back to. So that's going to be located at a link that you'll find in the show notes, and you can visit that whenever you have a hands-free moment. In addition to that list of questions that you can be asking any potential venues as you visit, I'm also going to put up kind of a flow chart of the steps to finding wedding venues near you. So the actual research steps, I have about 6 of them. Go through starting with online research, and at the end of that flow chart and that process, you should have a handful of great options that fit your criteria, and you can go ahead and take the next step, which is to go out and start visiting places in person. Okay, big show, big topic. Your wedding venue is a major checklist item, and I do hope you found today's overview helpful. I know we did a lot of checklist style stuff, and I went through some of it really quickly. So please check out the blog post that I put together on our website with a written recap of everything that we covered and also more. You'll find a link to that in today's show notes. Thank you so much for being here today, and be sure to tune in on Friday where we're doing a wedding Q&A show, and we're going to talk more about the common mistakes couples make when comparing all-inclusive venues with blank space venues. It's a great conversation. It can potentially save you thousands of dollars and a huge, huge, huge amount of headaches. For now, I'll let you go. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.